Hello friends, I hope you're well and that you're enjoying the beginning of your summer. Whatever you get up to this summer, I hope that you'll join us some Sundays for Zoom worship. Throughout July and August, we are hearing the exciting stories of some biblical families that are quite a lot like our own families. There is the excitement of births and weddings. There's sibling rivalry, jealousy, and arguments. We meet twin brothers, Jacob and Esau. Jacob, who tricks his older brother out of his inheritance with a bowl of stew, and then winds up getting tricked himself and ends up with 2 wives. Yikes! And we meet Joseph, whose brothers are so jealous of him, they literally sell him to a band of traveling slave traders. Whoa! Some of these stories seem a bit far-fetched, but they are about things that all of us experience and know about too. Times when we don't get along with our siblings, fights, misunderstandings, and making up too. And these stories are included in our Bible, even if we wonder about them or struggle with them and what they tell us about God and ourselves. Today I'd like to read you a story. It's called Is That Story True? By Laura Allery, illustrations by Margaret Kyle. Every night before bed, Maggie and Mummy read stories together. Maggie chooses a book and finds Neville, her stuffed ostrich. They make a cozy nest on Mummy's lap and snuggle together under a favorite quilt. And every night, Maggie asks the same question. One night, Maggie and Mummy read a story about a little girl who lived on the prairies many years ago. The little girl went to a school with only one room, had a chicken for a pet, and had to go to the bathroom in a little shed called an outhouse. One day, her brothers locked her in the outhouse and set the goat loose. The goat knocked the outhouse right over, and the brothers got in big trouble.
Is that story true?
Asked Maggie. Well, said Mummy, the little girl in the story was a real person. When she got older, she gathered all the stories she could remember and wrote them down. I don't know if everything happened exactly the way she remembered it, but I think her stories give us a true sense of what it was like to grow up in that place and at that time.
I see,
said Maggie, and climbed into bed. The next night, they read a story about a king. This king was granted one wish. Because he loved money, he wished that everything he touched would turn into gold.
I would like that,
Maggie interrupted. Would you? Asked Mummy. Keep listening. The king had made a foolish wish, for when he sat down at his table for supper, the food turned to gold as soon as he touched it, and he could not eat a thing. His clothes became gold and weighed him down. Hungry and tired, he called his children to keep him company. But when he reached out to hug them, they turned into gold statues, and he was left alone.
Is that story true?
Asked Maggie. Well, said Mummy, this story did not really happen. No one can turn things into gold by touching them. But what does the story mean? When we are greedy and want more and more, sometimes we end up losing the most important things. Do you think that's true?
I don't know,
answered Maggie. Think about it, said Mummy, and kissed Maggie goodnight. The next night, they read about a shepherd who looked after many sheep. Every night, when the sheep came back to the sheepfold, the shepherd would count them. One night, one sheep was missing, so the shepherd went into the darkness to look for the sheep that was lost. Uphill and down, through the shadowy woods, where wild animals roamed along narrow paths, the shepherd searched until at last he found the sheep. It was hiding behind a rock, cold and afraid. Gently, the shepherd took the sheep in his arms and brought it safely home.
Is that story true?
Asked Maggie. Well, said Mummy, do you remember the time you were lost?
Yes,
said Maggie.
You looked and looked for me until you found me. I think I know how the sheep felt.
Do you? Said Mummy. Then I guess the story is true. The next night, they read a story about a beautiful garden. Children loved to play among the flowers and eat the juicy fruit from the trees. They did not know that the garden belonged to a giant. One day, the giant came home from traveling and found the children in his garden. He was very angry and roared at them to go away. Frightened, the children ran away and did not return. The giant built a huge stone wall around the garden to keep the children out. As the months passed, the giant realized that spring was very slow to come. In fact, winter seemed to go on and on. Alone in the snow, the giant felt sad and lonely. His garden no longer seemed so beautiful. But one morning, he awoke to hear the drip, drip, drip of the melting snow. When he looked outside, he saw buds on the trees and crocuses peeking through the snowbanks. Spring had come at last. When the giant went outside to enjoy the garden, he saw why. The children had crept over the walls and climbed the trees. They had brought life and warmth with them.
Is that story true?
Asked Maggie. Well, said Mummy, what happens when people are selfish and will not share the beautiful things they have in their lives? What happens when people build walls to keep others out?
Maybe they get lonely?
Suggested Maggie. Maybe, said Mummy. Maybe they feel cold and dead, like it's winter inside them.
Maybe. Mummy,
said Maggie.
I've been thinking.
About what, my love?
I think that some stories are true on the inside, even if they are not true on the outside.
Mummy smiled and said, I think you may be right. Maggie climbed into bed. I love you, dear one, said Mummy.
Is that true?
Asked Maggie. Mummy smiled again and kissed Maggie on her forehead. Absolutely, she said.